Okay, well, Rachel, thank you so much for coming today to join the video library interview series. So Rachel, if you could, just give us your name, your title, and kind of what you do, so the viewers kind of understand where you're coming from.
So my name's Rachel Jarvie. I use she, her pronouns, and I work at an outpatient orthopedic clinic as a physical therapist. And that's kind of like the general, like what you think about when you think about physical therapy. Most people think about an outpatient ortho clinic. And I can answer more questions about like different areas of physical therapy as we get into it. But yeah, I work at Therapeutic Associates. And then I also do volunteer work with APTA Washington,
Wow.
specifically like the King County and student outreach sections. So I do leadership roles with that, and that's all, yeah, volunteer work. Mhm.
Very cool. So, with your volunteer work and also kind of your path to becoming a physical therapist, I'd imagine that you have a lot of education that you had to do. And could you explain a little bit about your educational background?
Yeah. So I grew up in Ballard. I went to Blanchette High School, and they offered a anatomy and physiology class. And that was the first class that I was like, wow, this is like really interesting. And I just love learning about this and I want to learn more about it.
Mm-hmm.
So then I went to Gonzaga University. I majored in human physiology and was kind of navigating, okay, what different healthcares or like careers can I do? Most of it was healthcare because that's human physiology
Mm-hmm.
mainly. And then shadowed at different places. Physical therapy kind of just rung out as a career that I really jived with. Um, and then I took a gap year. I was an aide at an outpatient orthopedic clinic, actually the one that I'm working at currently, and then applied to physical therapy schools. And then I ended up going to Creighton University after my 4 years of undergrad. And yeah, I got my doctorate of physical therapy degree there. Creighton is in Omaha, Nebraska. So it's a little like, you know, different culturally than where I grew up in the Pacific Northwest.
Right,
It's a
right.
good, like, change of pace for me. Yeah.
Change of pace. So is
Mhm.
that 4 years of college and then another 4 years for the doctor in physical therapy? So 8 years total.
So, yeah, the Doctor of Physical Therapy degree is 4 years, but most schools cram them into three. So you just like do school through the summer. You just don't get like summer break or as much break.
Mm,
So yeah, most PT schools are like 3 years, but 4 years curriculum wise. Mhm.
gotcha. Lots of school, and you kind of touched on what got you interested, and it sounds like at first it was a like intellectual interest where you got into the physiology class in high school and was like, wow, this is really cool. And then
Mhm.
college you kind of explored and then you were like, wow, physical therapy is jiving with me. And could you tell me a little bit about what it's like jiving with you? Was it when you saw a patient being treated through physical therapy that where you thought like, wow, this is really great, or was it a culmination of moments? What kind of made it click for you?
Yeah, so I think it was more of a culmination of moments. But I thought like the idea of physical therapy is really cool. So in like healing the body in ways where you're like moving, giving exercises, changing your body position, using a bunch of different techniques to make people feel better and move better and like go about their day to day pain free. I felt like was really cool. And then I loved how much time you get to spend with patients too, because I feel
Mm,
like some other healthcare careers, like they see their patients for like 15 minutes, like once a year.
mm,
And so you don't really get that relationship building in those versus PT. It's like, oh, I see in outpatient ortho, at least I see patient like once or twice a week
Mm,
for an
right.
hour. And yeah, you just like learn about their lives. You become close friends with some of them, and you really get to see their progression in terms of them getting better too, which is
Mm.
really
So it
cool.
sounds like you get that relationship building aspect because you get to see them for a long time, multiple times, and then you get to still be working with the body. So you get both the best both worlds. So that's really cool.
Mhm.
Um, I'm curious, you're probably working with all kinds of patients around all kinds of issues. But just so for us viewers to kind of understand what the day-to-day is like, could you let us know what you see, do, think on a daily basis? And I'm sure there's no typical day, but as best as you can, like maybe a typical day you could share with us.
Yeah, so I work for 10-hour days. So I work Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday. Um, and I'll work from like 8 to 7 with like a lunch break type of thing. Um, and I'll see like a whole variety of people in that amount of time. So my youngest patient I've seen is like 5 years old.
Mm.
Oldest patient I've seen was 99.
Wow.
Um, so just like a huge age range of differences. So like, and then 1 minute I'll be working with a runner, who's trying to like return to like do marathons
Right.
and have like knee pain or something like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'll be working with a person who has like Parkinson's disease and is working on just trying to like walk and like pick up
Mm.
things and like find that control with motion. And so I really like that variety. I know
Mm.
that might like scare some people maybe because you have to have a lot of knowledge in your brain to be able to do that.
Right.
Um, but having that change of pace and that like seeing different people and like helping them through their different pathways, I find really fun and rewarding. Keeps me on my toes,
I
which is
bet.
nice.
Do you have a favorite kind of patient that you like to treat? I know you said variety is what you enjoy, but like I really like the Parkinson's patients or I love the runners. Do you have a favorite type?
I right now, I really enjoy working with pregnant women or people who have just been pregnant. Which there's a whole other like field of physical therapy in like pelvic floor, which I'm kind of like stepping my feet into a little bit. And yeah, I find that really fun and interesting. Hmm.
Wow, very cool. And when you're kind of working with those patients from those that have, when you're working with women or when you're working with runners or those with Parkinson's disease, um, yes, you need a lot of knowledge, but I'm sure there's other skills that you need too, like being able to communicate or being able to be empathetic. And what makes someone really successful as a physical therapist, in your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, one, just having a lot of knowledge definitely is helpful. And the more you learn, like it's a constant, a field where you're just constantly going to be learning more and more. So we just take continuing education yearly. Um, but two, yeah, having really good communication skills makes a huge difference. Sometimes, you know, I feel like a patient's not getting better because the communication in like how you communicating with them is like not how they're like wanting to be communicated with.
Mm,
And so like being creative and being able to kind of um yeah, communicate with a bunch of different people is really helpful.
hmm.
Um as you said, empathy is a big part of what we do too though. Yeah.
Okay.
Um so yes, I mean people will come in and sometimes they'll just be in a ton of pain.
Mm,
And so being able to like sit with them and hear where they're at, but also be able to kind of take yourself away from that so that you don't get too emotionally involved, I think is important too.
mm, mm,
So, because if you're too emotionally involved in in their pain, you can like get a little bit burnt out.
right.
On the end of your day, you're too emotionally exhausted. And so you have to kind of like be able to separate yourself some from that so that you can have the bandwidth to treat and help a ton of people. And so being able to have empathy and listen, but also be able to separate yourself from that too, I think is good.
Yeah, and I imagine that skill of having compassion with boundaries is something that is probably learned rather than something that someone already has, because so I used to be a CNA, and it was, you see a lot of things, and it's hard to kind of get into that mindset of this is work and this is not work. So I imagine that's trained too.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so I wonder, is it all, roses and amazingness when it comes to physical therapy, or are there some challenges that viewers should be aware of so they have a realistic understanding of what physical therapy is? Maybe it's the physical toll, or you kind of touched on this, the emotional toll as well. Any thoughts there to kind of give folks a realistic view?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you are as a person, what might be more challenging for you as a physical therapist. For me, I love working with people,
Hmm.
but I am more introverted. And so sometimes at the end of my 10-hour day, I get a little tired just because I'm talking all day, with people. And so I feel like that is a challenge for me. But my boss, she's very extroverted. She could talk to people all day long and be like, and she gives her energy. So for
Okay.
her, that is
Yeah.
not a barrier at all.
Totally.
um, I still love what I do, even though it's tiring.
Sure.
Uh, and then maybe another challenge is like when you start out from school, there's just a lot of uncertainty. You're like, am I doing things right?
Yeah.
Um, and then as you get into your career more, you like just, get more knowledge, you just learn from experience and you just feel more confident. But there's always those cases where you're like, oh, this is weird. And so feeling comfortable in the uncomfortable um, uh, can be a challenge for some people. And just I think the more you're okay with you don't know everything and then it's going to be a constant learning experience, the better you'll be as a physical therapist.
I see.
Mhm.
So just someone that might not be able to embrace that constant learning might be a little difficult adjusting to physical therapy. But it sounds like even though one might be introverted, you can still be a good physical therapist like yourself. So just kind of be aware about that talking. And I can relate too. I'm introverted as well. So hopefully
Mhm.
this is not getting you more tired.
No, no. Today's my day off,
Today's
so
your day off. Okay. Um, you know, albeit those challenges of maybe having to always communicate and then having to always learn,
Mhm.
what are some of the moments that make it worth it to be a physical therapist? Is it when you get a thank you from a patient after working with them for so long? What really makes you think like this is it for me?
Mhm. Yeah. I think it's really working with those patients that are really doing well and they're like, yeah, getting back to the things that they love to do. Um, and they're, yeah, verbally or, thanking you or giving you gifts or something like that. That makes me happy. Yeah, it
Right.
makes it very rewarding. Yeah.
Mm, gotcha. So if someone is service oriented and really enjoys that gratification of getting a thank you, this really might be the profession for them, it sounds like.
Hmm.
Well, kind of transitioning to how you got to where you are. I'm sure there's both been challenges and ups when getting to your current position. And one thing I wanted to ask you is about kind of some of the discrimination that might happen when someone is pursuing physical therapy. So we have a diverse audience watching this video, and in your perspective, what are some of the challenges around discrimination that you may have had to navigate as you kind of went into becoming a physical therapist? And at the same time, do you have any ideas on how to break down barriers to making it a more anti-racist and inclusive culture, just so that everybody, regardless of their race or income or English speaking abilities, can become a physical therapist?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So as a profession, physical therapy is very white. And the APTA, which is the Physical Therapy Association, and many companies too, have acknowledged that and are hopefully working towards like creating more representation within our community of physical therapists. Um, I, as a like half white, half Japanese female, have kind of navigated like both sides of that. Some
Hmm.
people visually see me as white and they don't recognize any of the Japanese in me, and some people view the opposite. And so it's kind of a weird navigation at some points. Um, I feel like as a physical therapist, um, and navigating in my career, um, have been lucky enough to not have too many barriers in terms of like getting in. And I think that comes with like, other financial privileges that I've had in my upbringing. Um, and I also kind of have stepped in and pushed into roles as a physical therapist in my volunteer work, and then also in the company that I am a part of now to kind of help try to bring more diversity into the field. So, I mean, that's been a passion of mine for a long time. And going into the profession, I was hoping to bring more about as well. So, as the chair of the student outreach committee, my goal is to just like bring more awareness about physical therapy to all communities. And then at Therapeutic Associates, I'm on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Belonging Committee and Task Force. And our goals are to, yeah, bring more awareness about like microaggressions and how that might be impacting not only our patients but our therapists, because um, it's a working with people, those racism will come from both the patient side and the therapist side. And so navigating these relationships with our patients and then also with our employers and things is very important. um, I think right now having as many open conversations on this topic is important. And um, I find myself in a privileged place to be having those conversations.
Mm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Sounds like you're doing a lot of DI work, but also having those open conversations to kind of keep the space open for more new folks to participate. And yeah, I guess also just sharing about me a little bit, being full Japanese. There are times when I was working as a CNA, I would be talking to like this really tall white male, and it was like, oh, like you're not everybody, but some felt like it felt like it wasn't a very good conversation. And then I see him talking to someone else that is of his race, and it's like, oh, I wonder, if this is something based on my race that I'm treated differently. Um, and I think for me, it's always like been, do I just having to make that calculus can be exhausting.
Mhm.
Um, but for me, the way I've kind of realized is to decide which battles to fight, because I can't fight them all. So yeah, do you have any kind of thoughts as you have navigated both sides, I guess, about
Mhm.
what how you kind of pick your battles, or maybe you don't pick your battles, just any advice, I guess, there.
Mhm. Yeah, I it can be exhausting to have those conversations. And I feel lucky that my work environment is very like supportive, and we have like good venting sessions with one another. More of those battles are coming from working with patients probably,
Mm.
than the community that I'm working with. Um, so finding a good community can be really important for you, and making sure that you're having good conversations with your coworkers, I think is great. Um, and then, yeah, choosing your battles, finding advocates. Yeah, again, my coworkers are very supportive of me. So if they're hearing something that they're not happy with, and if I'm feeling like uncomfortable in a situation and don't feel like I can say something, or just don't want to say something because it's exhausting, it's, how many times have I said this already type of thing, then they can sometimes step in and have that conversation, which is really great. Hmm.
Right, right. Sounds
Hmm.
like finding that community is really important.
Yeah.
Um, and as a high school student who might want to join that community,
Yeah.
um, what kind of steps should they be taking? Let's imagine it's a sophomore in a high school that
Mhm.
is kind of looking into healthcare in general, but they are considering physical therapy, especially after watching you.
Mhm.
Any kind of advice you would give them so they can successfully navigate that pathway?
Yeah, I think learning as much as you can about physical therapy, whether that be kind of navigating through the APTA, Washington, or the APTA in general's page, their website. That can be a good resource that's free. You can also just shadow a local clinic. Most outpatient orthopedic clinics are allowing shadowing. Um, I know with COVID, there was some like, oh, we're not really allowing that right now, but I think that's really opened up now. So you can
Hmm.
pretty much just like contact your local physical therapy clinic and see if you can shadow and learn more about it. I'm sure somebody will be happy to allow that. Um, yeah, I think it's a little bit harder in different settings though to do that. Like inpatient and acute, so more in like the hospital settings for physical therapy. So there, yeah, physical therapists in a number of settings. I think there's more restrictions still with COVID on that. And so just starting out, I think with an outpatient orthopedic clinic would be a good place to begin.
So
Hmm.
you can start shadowing as a high school student in these outpatient clinics. Okay. And then let's say they do shadow and they're like, wow, this is really awesome. I want to explore this more. Do they need to go to college for physical therapy, or are there non-college pathways? What's the kind of next step after high school?
Hmm. So after high school, there are, if you want to become a physical therapist, then you do have to go to college. Um, there are some programs that do like a 3-year pathway. So you can look into what schools those are. I know Creighton, you can do 3 years of undergrad, and then that goes directly into 3 years of PT school, but you have to know that you want to do that before you apply. Um, or you can just get your undergrad degree in whatever you want. You just have to get your prerequisites and then apply to PT school afterwards. There are physical therapy assistants too, which is a different career path from a physical therapist. They can do pretty much everything a physical therapist can do besides the evaluation. So they'll do like the full treatment, they can progress plan of care, all of that, but they cannot do like the first initial visit with the patient. They can't diagnose that the patient came in with whatever it is. But that you don't need a undergrad degree for. You can get your associate's degree, and then I think a lot of community colleges, like they have programs for PTAs. I can
Hmm.
send you a link of all the Washington PTA and PT programs if you're interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we might put that in the video description down below about all
Sounds
those
good.
links. Um,
Yeah.
so it sounds like, okay, in high school, you shadow in these outpatient clinics, you're excited about PT, and then you can decide either going to the physical therapy assistant route or a full-blown physical therapist. If you
Mm,
were to go to that PTA route, you either go to community college or you don't even need to go to community college and you can just, get a job as a PTA. And if you want to become a full-blown physical therapist, you either go to a normal university or four-year college to kind of get your physical therapy uh, degree,
mm.
or maybe biology degree. Love to hear that. And then, or you could take one of those kind of shorter routes where your undergrad counts as your doctorate of physical therapy. It sounds like. Does that kind of summarize the pathways there, or did I get something wrong?
Yes, it summarizes it. It would be if you decide right away that you want to become a physical therapist, it would be more of a 6 year um, thing, and then you just kind of skip through your undergrad, but it's weird. It's like a 3 year undergrad, and then it goes straight into PT school 3 years after that. But there are only a few schools that do that. And then, yeah. hmm Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, that sounds like a very exciting and also arduous process. So,
Mhm.
when someone's kind of thinking about, how they should finance that path and how they should maybe develop their character around like persistence and, perseverance, do you have any advice so that they can kind of, be successful in that?
Yeah. Um, well, I would say choose a school that will either give you some, good financial aid, scholarships, or just cheaper, um, because it is an expensive pathway. Um, you can do what I did too, take a gap year between undergrad and grad school, get a year of experience under your belt as like a physical therapy aide, and then also just like gain money during that time so that it's easier to afford. But yeah, it is very expensive, and I realize that that's like a big barrier for a lot of people deciding to go into physical therapy or any healthcare career in general, because it's a long, expensive road ahead. And
Right, right.
most students leave with some sort of debt. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So does the school that you kind of go to not matter as much as long as you're able to kind of get the degree and you do well in that school?
Yeah, I mean, when you're getting hired as a physical therapist, I mean, there are definitely schools that are ranked higher, um, but it doesn't matter what school, like you will get a job as a physical therapist no
Mhm.
matter what school you go to. Um, and it's more of like what you take out of that learning experience, what clinical experiences you have, because most schools have their for a full last year is like clinical experiences where they're learning from a physical therapist working in that field. Those I think are more important
Okay.
than the school in itself. Mhm.
Well, that's great to hear. So, go for the cheap option and just do well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so you've, Rachel, kind of shared with us your background, your day to day, and kind of like how you got there. And so we're kind of getting to the end here of our um, show, if you will. And do you have any, final advice that you would like to impart to middle and or high school youth looking into, physical therapy or just healthcare in general?
Yeah, I would say just get as much experience as you can learning about, physical therapy or any other healthcare career. The more you learn about it and figure out like what the day-to-day life is like, the better, because there are so many options, in terms of healthcare. There are so many options in terms of the career in general. And so just like knowing what you want to do and feeling good about that decision, I think is great, because it's a long road. Yeah, so you should be certain that you want to do it.
Searching,
Hmm.
searching. She means you all to keep watching the other videos, so you keep
Yeah.
searching. So Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for your insights and kind of sharing your pathway. I'm sure everybody benefited, so really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Thank you.